Exciting guest today. We have Amie Archibald, and she's going to introduce herself in just a minute. But today we're going to talk about all things speaking. So if you're a nurse, or even if you're not a nurse, you're interested in speaking, we're going to talk about tips on really how to get these speaking engagements, how to get paid to speak, right? Because a lot of times it's for free. And we're going to talk about, just kind of everything related to that and what Amie is doing because guys, Amie is everywhere. She's on the news, she's doing a podcast, writing a book, so many exciting things going on with you, Amie. So thank you for joining us and tell the people all about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farah, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So, my name is Amie Archibald-Varley. I'm a nurse, I'm a podcaster, I'm an upcoming author, which is wild. And I'm also a speaker, and I'm also a health equity advocate. So, lots of different things under my belt. My previous undergraduate and my work had centered really around maternal child. So I was a labor and delivery nurse for over 12 years, then moved into various different forms of leadership. So moving from a bedside role to an educator to then like a clinical nurse specialist type of role. And then moving actually into quality improvement, which was an eye-opening experience. So again, like just kind of jumping in with my experience and trying to learn a little bit more. And then I moved into a health equity specialist role. And then also I am doing all these other things. So speaking, writing a book. So I would say that's probably the gamut about me. Oh, I missed one thing. I'm also a freelance journalist, which is a whole other piece. It just kind of fell into my lap, I'd say,
Mhm.
through some of the advocacy work from the podcast. But yeah, I'll kind of leave it there. Just a lot of different things that I'm doing.
Yes, right? A lot of people are probably tired just listening to that.
Oh my God, I'm tired.
But I totally feel you because listen, we're nurses and we could do all things, adapt, we're super adaptable. And you forgot one, you're a mom as well.
I
Um,
am
which is one of the most right important roles.
hundred.
I yeah, I too am a mom, and you're all of these things, right? Entrepreneurship, right? Also entrepreneur. So I'm so happy to have you on, and I know that you work closely with Sarah, where
Yes.
I've had her also on as well. So you guys, if you're watching, say hello. Let us know where you're watching from, city, country. Let us know if you have any comments, questions. Drop them in there. If you happen to be watching the replay, you could also put your comments in there. So the reason, guys, that I'm wearing red, I am also a fellow Canadian, and Amie also is Canadian. So I was actually talking to her before this because I thought that she resided in Toronto, but I was like, hey, close enough, Hamilton, right? H Town. So I want to ask you, Amie, do they still use the slang in Toronto? Okay, so I say
All right.
Toronto, right? Do they
Toronto.
use the six to
They still
describe?
use the six, 100%.
Okay, do they still use the T dot?
That we still use T dot. Yep.
Okay, and then do you guys say guy?
I
Or is
I
that
would say
changed?
it's probably lessened now. I think it's come down, I mean, I think during I would say probably like the early 2000s, it was
Yeah.
all the hype, right? I think I used it too, in high school, like, what's up, guy? All of that craziness. I think it's lessened now. I think they moved on to different things.
Yeah, okay. And then reach.
Yeah, I think that's a Caribbean thing too, though, right? So like,
Okay, okay, okay.
so yeah, I think they still kind of use that. Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to throw that out there. I was like, hey, I gotta ask her all these things. So talk to us, right? About, and again, for those who are just watching and maybe don't know me, my name is Farah, and I'm the founder of International Nurse Coach. I'm a career coach and also a nurse and entrepreneur as well. So Amie, tell them how you kind of got started in speaking, because I'm also a speaker, and I want to actually get more speaking engagements, but not just speaking, right? Paid. Talk to them about how you got into speaking and kind of why.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. And I think this is a question I actually get a lot. And I'll be honest, I think the speaking kind of grew out of some of the work that I was doing previously. So, some of the work that I had done with Sarah, we both started a podcast. And we
Mhm.
started that podcast kind of out of a necessity to talk about mental health and to talk about issues. So really it was almost based off of our own stories, our personal experiences. And podcasting kind of gave us a little bit of a platform and a launch to start having conversations because I think if people think about public speaking is, I think they said one of the most scariest things to do. Like most people really hate it. But
Yeah.
I think the more you have the ability to have conversations with people about your own personal experiences, because the other piece that's important about being a public speaker is actually sharing what your story is. Like what is your pathway, what is something out there that you can talk to people about that they might be able to take away and learn from, or is your story really unique in which someone can say, hey, I've never thought about something this way, and through this person's experience and their story, it's kind of brought this to light. So I would say really what kind of helped me get into speaking and having more conversations was actually through a podcast. And anybody can start a podcast. You pick up a microphone and you set your conversation. So for myself and Sarah, it was talking about mental health, talking about nursing as a profession. And
Mhm.
again, I think the challenging piece is finding your voice, because I think a lot of nurses struggle with what that actually means, because there is fear behind having really powerful and important conversations. So
Mhm.
even just this week, myself and Sarah talked about nursing and war, and in some cases people are like, these are topics that are untouchable, but why? So we need to move beyond why we're not having these conversations, or why healthcare might not feel that we don't have a role in talking about geopolitics or things that are happening, but our roles are so intricately connected that we have
Mhm.
to have a say. So I think that's the compelling piece. If you have something important to say, that will help launch you. And then again, having that podcast was really instrumental in starting that journey with speaking.
That's so funny that you bring up podcasting because, as I told you, today I had two LinkedIn lives. Usually I have
Yeah.
one, but I was like, hey, two in one day, it's all good. I love it. I was like, let's do it. I had the guest on Sandra earlier, and we talked about podcasting and how it opened up so many opportunities for her. And so it's funny, it's like a nice segue to this about speaking,
Yeah.
because it does open up a lot of opportunities. And I actually do this LinkedIn live show. It gets streamed on, YouTube, Facebook, and all that. But I'm like, you know what? I did have Anchor FM, and I'm thinking about maybe going back and putting all those episodes into the podcast and then starting it from there, because really repurposing your content is important. So talk to us about, I know it's the Gritty Nurse podcast. When did you start that?
So myself and Sarah started that back in 2019. Like I said before, it was kind of a podcast of necessity. Sarah didn't actually know much about podcasting, didn't listen to podcasts. I did. And I just said, hey, you know what? I think we need to have a platform where we can share our voice, our opinions, because you know what? No one's gonna give us that space. That's the other thing. Like no one is going to give you the space to have these conversations. And it was kind of us just creating our own table. And I remember when I came to her and said, hey, let's call this the Gritty Nurse podcast. She was like, yeah, sold. This sounds perfect. And it's because we wanted to talk about things that were real to us, that were really visceral to us. So again, like that was our launch, really, our starting to have those types of conversations that maybe nurses weren't talking about these things, but they were actually intricately tied to the work that we do. We see patients from a variety of different backgrounds and experiences, and we have to think about how these various different social determinants affect the way that we treat patients when they come in. So it's like, there's nothing off the table. We can talk about anything. Um, and again, what also provided opportunity was with doing that podcast, I started doing a lot of media. And it was wild because that's the other piece. Nurses aren't typically seen in the media. There is some fear and apprehension about talking to the media because of workplace policies, or not necessarily, I'll say, understanding what the workplace policies. Because again, if you're speaking on behalf of yourself and you're
Mhm.
not speaking on behalf of the organization, then technically, from a legal standpoint, you're safe. Um, and yeah, I just started talking to the media about nursing, about healthcare, about mental health, about my personal story and my personal struggle. And then it just continued to build from there. And I became a CBC freelance journalist. So I do independent media. I started talking on the radio, which is wild as well, just being a radio columnist and talking about a variety of different issues. And that's when I don't know, an interest started building in having me come out to speak about various different topics.
That's really, I think, it's really amazing what you and Sarah have done, because honestly, if you think about it, because I used to work in Canada as well. I'm Canadian, now I'm in the US, but I feel like sometimes, especially the things you spoke about nursing in Canada, it's a lot different, but really healthcare in itself globally has a lot of similar issues. If you think about it, staffing issues and all that. But a lot
Right.
of people are afraid to, like you said, going to the media and talk about specific issues just in general, but even as nurses, and even are afraid to branch out into entrepreneurship and start their own business because they're always worried about what their employer might think or say, or that maybe
Right.
they might be let go. But something that I always want to tell nurses is that you have to start branding yourself and separating yourself from from organizations, because I always say organizations really are not loyal. There might be some really good ones, but from my experiences and what I've seen, there's people that stay in these jobs for like 10, 20, 30 years. And then there's not a lot of loyalty. And we see all these layoffs and things like that. It happened to me one time. And it's so cutthroat. So this is what I say: when you have a platform to start building your brand, something like podcasting or speaking gives you an extra edge and another source of revenue, because as we know, most nurses really have usually 2 or 3 jobs, right?
Right.
So if you want to kind of talk about that and like that branding aspect and how that helps you with speaking.
Yeah, branding is hugely important. I can't stress enough how important it is to actually be able to put yourself out and identify what your brand is. So I would say that most people who, like, if you typed my name into Google, you'll see already that I'm indexed as a journalist. I started kind of creating my brand pretty much right on the outset of having this podcast, talking about, you probably will notice that Sarah and I have very different personalities, but I think at the end of the day, it's really about, like, who am I as a person and what do I want people to know about me?
Mhm.
And I think that's how I continue to build my brand. So I wanted people to know that I was outspoken and that I was not going to shy away from really hard conversations.
Mhm.
I wanted people to know that I would be open and visceral and raw about talking about mental health and share my personal journey and my personal story. And that's what makes me so unique to, this particular nursing space. And the other piece, I'll be honest, which is a part of my brand, is challenging the status quo, which is for some people very scary, but for me, it's so important. I think that, again, like you said, I'm not going to say what I was going to say because the Chris Brown song came in my head, but they're not loyal. And that was a real visceral moment that I had when I found out that your employer, at the end of the day, you are a number. You leave there, you quit, you die, you're sick, they will replace you. Your family can't replace you. You are irreplaceable to your family. And I had to decide to myself, like, what
Yeah.
is most important? And we saw that story of, and we've seen that one particular story that I think is quite viral about that nurse who wrote a letter to her abuser, which was her employer.
Yeah.
But this is not even unique. Like that was kind of actually one of the reasons why Sarah and I left our workplace, because we were feeling this pressure. We needed to, talk about things that most folks didn't want to talk about. And a part of my brand was really to dismantle systems of oppression, to be open to have a voice, and to never shy away from conversation. So I'd say that's where Sarah and myself differ a little bit, where I'm very, very outspoken, very, very vocal on Twitter and in these very different spaces, and never shied away from having conversations that were different. And I think that, in the speaking world, again, this
Mhm.
is what's actually very, very important. They're looking for people who have a unique set of skills or a unique set of ideas that can challenge people's minds and perspectives. That's what speaking is about. You're sharing a very important part about yourself or about, your life pathway, but you're also empowering other people to do something different. So you need to have that unique set, that unique branding that you could bring to the table, where an employer says, hey, you know what? I think our workforce needs to hear this messaging. Our workforce needs to hear about compassion and empathy from this type of lens. And I think that's how branding is really, really important. Like, what is the story that you want to tell?
Yeah, you covered a lot there, and related to speaking, because this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. But everything you talked about goes back to the speaking, right? So one big thing you mentioned is, people sometimes shy away from certain topics, or they're not really coming with their true self, or their, authenticity. And really, I think that's what's missing in the world today a lot of times. And this is what I think some speakers, um, really break out instead of others. And I think probably that's why you have a lot of success as well, especially in Canada. And I know you have speaking engagements in the US as well. But I think that authentic part and also sharing your story, you talked about sharing your story, and then people in their really lived experiences, because like you can't really talk about something that hasn't really happened, right? So
Right.
I think that is important in speaking as well, and really connecting with your audience. And it's not really about you. That's what I realized in speaking.
Yeah. Who's the message for, right?
Nervous, right? And I think it's human, like nature. I spoke at in Las Vegas at the National Nurses and Business Association. I was really nervous, but I thought, what am I nervous about? These are all nurses. I'm speaking about something that's important to them, and you spoke about empowering others. So when people realize it has nothing to do with you, and it's more about delivering a message to the audience and like how you can help them or empower them or like educate them or whatever it is, while keeping it entertaining and things like that, right? And engaging the audience is really important, right? Asking questions and things like that. So, like, what would you say your tips are for somebody who's new and wants to get out there and speak? And, I know you have to kind of build your way up, but like, what are some ways and tips that people can get into speaking and to eventually have a speaking career?
Yeah, so I know probably people don't want to hear this first tip is unfortunately you probably will do some speaking engagements for free. And I think people want to I think it let me preface it with
Or pro
this.
bono
There
or whatever.
are
Yeah.
or pro bono, right? I think that there are going to be some organizations that the message that you're sending is much more important than the dollar amount that will come back into your pocket because that group that you might be speaking to, you might have a CEO that's sitting from another board of another company or whatever the case may be
Mhm,
in that room. And I think this is where sometimes you have to think about who is the audience that I'm delivering this message to, and how might this actually help me? How might this benefit me? Because there have been opportunities that what there have been opportunities I've turned down, but there have been opportunities where I would never pass it up because it aligns with the values and the vision that I have. So, for example, there's an amazing organization called Sisters in Sync. They're a non for profit, and I didn't bat an eye based on just hearing the entrepreneur's story
mhm,
and the importance of the work that she was doing for Black women and girls. I couldn't say no. Like, I think just the importance of having those types of conversations are always going to be there. So I think, yes, you will do some that are pro bono. And I think that it's actually important because that's also how you can start to hone your skills as a speaker.
mhm,
The other piece is you really need to be, like you said, you need to be authentic. People can tell that if you don't have a story, you don't have something to share. People can tell that when you get up there,
mhm.
that you don't want to be reading off of a PowerPoint because people are if they're paying or whatever the case may be, they're paying to see you. They're paying to hear your message. So again, it's so important that again, when you're connecting, you're engaging with the audience, that you are your authentic self, and and I'm not saying that speaking isn't nerve-wracking, because I could tell
Right.
you every time before I go to speak, I am nervous. And I think that's a good thing, right? I think it's just about how you kind of conduct yourself, and I think my nerves is just making sure that I want people to really understand what I'm trying to say. But
Right.
authenticity is so important. I think that I'm going to say that the age of the PowerPoint is dead. It's great to use it as a skeleton, but it shouldn't be your sole focus. Your sole focus should be the words coming out of your mouth
Mhm.
and how you can engage and connect with the audience.
Yeah, those are great, great, great points. You said something because this is kind of like, and I just started speaking recently, but you said a couple things, right? So number one, I think you highlighted that you have to have a mission, a purpose, and values, right? Because it'll help you
Right.
decide the direction that you want to go into. And then the second piece, like you said, is you want to make an impact as well. And sometimes the currency will not always be in money, but it will be maybe in another form, like we talked about, right? So it's building those connections, or you don't know who's in the audience to maybe get your next opportunity to speak or do something
Right.
else. So, what do you say to those who maybe really have a message, but they're just kind of like afraid to get out there and speak? And what would be would you recommend joining a speaking bureau? And when would you, like, what timing would you?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a tricky question, and I'll say why. This is why I'll say it's tricky. So yes, I am a part of a speaking bureau. However, I do not pay for a membership. There are a variety of different forms of speaking bureaus. Some that they reach out to you and they say to you, okay, we would like to have you a part of our bureau, and how we will do this is we'll advertise for you, and we'll take a certain portion off of your speaking fee. But again, the speaking fees are set at a value of, how would I describe this? At like proper market value for speakers, because the currency does vary, right? There you can go from having a speaking engagement without a bureau from anywhere between 0 to maybe 2,500, but most speaking bureaus start at 2,500 and upwards. So you're looking at having, being paid and compensated well for the work that you put in. However, I do know that there are other types of speaking bureaus that you could pay a membership fee for.
Mhm.
To be honest, I don't know much about those speaking bureaus. From my experience, it's better to be approached, and sometimes it might even be about kind of getting to know who's a part of these speaking bureaus. So even going on, seeing who the president and CEO is, and even reaching out. And I think this is where it's important that you have a media kit. And if you don't, I would say you probably need one, because what they're going to be looking for is what sets you apart. Why should we have you come in to speak to these organizations?
Mhm.
And having a media kit will start helping inform how they might go about making that decision. So do you have experience speaking elsewhere? What is your story? What is some of the work that you've outlined? And having that media kit will really help give them a clear idea of what direction they can take you in. The other piece is, if you are doing it on your own,
Mhm.
it's that outreach and that connection and go and meeting people is going to be hugely important. I can't speak more enough for the fact that you might have to take some risks and get out there and speak to folks, and you might have to do some things pro bono. But I think that, again, if your mission, vision, and values align with the folks that you're speaking with, I can't promise, but I can tell you people will be listening to that message, and eventually you might get picked up by a speaking bureau as well.
Awesome tips. And I just wanted to share, if anybody is listening there, please say hello. Let us know what city, country you're watching from. Drop us any comments, any questions that you may have about speaking, or anything that we're kind of talking about now. But I wanted to bring up something, a media kit. Can you kind of break down briefly what that would include for those listeners out
Right.
there that want to maybe just build it up?
So yeah, a media kit really is highlighting all of the great work that you've done. And I could tell you, nurses hate tooting their own horn, but this is the time on a media kit to toot your own horn, your awards, some of your accomplishments. What actually is your story? The other piece, a part of a media kit, is social media, right? So they might want to see how many followers you have on Instagram, Twitter, and these various different accounts, who you might have interacted with and had previous speaking engagements with, but it's really highlighting who you are and what makes you so unique that they want to kind of grab you up. So this would be your huge opportunity to some. I would say it is an investment. Yes, you can go do it on Canva, but maybe you want a copy editor to kind of go over the work to help build it for you. So maybe you want to spend a little bit of money to help get your media kit done. But I think it's important to have a really, really great media kit. And honestly, I'm going to say this is the time for you to shine and big yourself up. Don't be shy, put it all out there and make sure people know what your worth is.
Awesome. So I'm actually going to start working on my media kit, because I don't have one just yet. So you're motivating me to do that. And you mentioned something very important, right? Investing in yourself. So we talk about this a lot, as an entrepreneur, or even if you're just trying to brand yourself, like things like investing in a photographer, and getting regular photography, things like that. And you may not need to spend a lot. You can even look at maybe some student photographers, maybe
Yep.
they're trying to do some freelance work where maybe you may not have a lot of money, but you can, you could do it that way. And then you mentioned some great things about showing up to events, right? And connecting and networking and not being afraid to ask. So you know me, like I'm
Yep.
not shy. I'm like, hey, you need a speaker to speak at your next event? Let's go. And then pitching yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I follow somebody on LinkedIn and I've met her in person. Her name's Precious and she is like the pitch queen, talks about pitching all the time, speaks all over the place. You may have heard of her, but she talks so much about the importance of pitching. And you mentioned how nurses are always trying to play small. And when I do my interview coaching with my clients, I tell them, listen, you got to brag and swag. So I say you got to come,
I love
you got to
that.
brag about yourself, right? So, what do you have to say about that? Like pitching yourself for speaking.
Yeah, what I've always said, and I think this is actually something that I was taught was never to be afraid of a yes. We are always so afraid that we might not get that yes, but you have to actually ask the question, right? You got to be able to put yourself out there and say, hey, I've actually been doing some of this work. And if you are looking for a speaker, this is why I'd be ideal to come speak at your next event. And I tell you, people are listening. I mean, there's other ways to do it. So like you might have a card and you might be able to have that card on hand. There's NFCs too, which I love because now you can tap and like after you've had that conversation, tap that information directly into someone's phone.
Mhm.
But it's important that you do big yourself up. That when you need to know and work the room. I tell one of the things I learned from one of my cousins who's a huge speaker as well, is the fact that when she goes out to these networking events, she brings like blank cards with her and she'll meet people who are in those positions of being able to say, hey, yes, I would love to have this
Positions.
person, and has conversations with them, writes their information down, and will follow up with an email. Sometimes it takes us to do a little bit of extra legwork to really make those connections happen. But again, you'll never know until you approach that individual and have that conversation. And I think that if you can shine and you do shine, they'll never forget you. They're not going to forget that message. They're not going to forget your face. And then, making those connections, do that is hugely important.
Right. And something that I've learned, so just, sidebar, sometimes we don't want to get dressed up or things like that. But I truly believe that so before I used to be very muted in my colors of what I wore and stuff, but I really believe in like if you stand out in your wardrobe, even though you may not feel comfortable or whatever, but even if it's like an accessory or something that can start a conversation, I really think the way you dress helps you stand out. And it's important, especially at speaking events. So when I was in Vegas, I wore like this crazy blinged out blazer and boots. And that people may not remember my name, but they'll be like, hey, that was the chick that was wearing like the blinged out shoes or whatever, right? So you want to be memorable and stand out. So what are your thoughts on, for example, maybe getting a stylist or something for an event if you can afford it? Or I had another question, but go ahead with that one.
I do believe it is important, but I believe, I'll be honest, I think your elevator pitch is even more important. So it's that 2 to 3 minute talk with that whoever that individual is, that executive, that
Mhm.
person who's from their comms department. Knowing what your pitch is, your 2 to 3 minute talk is
Mhm.
really what's going to make that huge impact. And I think it's important that everybody has an elevator pitch. You need to know
Yep.
what exactly are they looking for? What exactly do you want them to remember about you? And then lastly, what are you asking of them? Do you want them to call you back? Do you want to have a sit down conversation with them? Do you want to go to lunch with them? It's okay to be like, hey, I would love to have a coffee with you. Make sure you have a prepared pitch. So when you go to speak to them, you have your 3 minutes, 1, 2, 3 to the top. You're finishing that off with asking with, I would love to hear back from you. I would love to have a coffee. I would love to have a meeting with you. So you come away with a tangible action. So even more important than the close is what you're going to say, and make sure that you have that elevator pitch. Because yes, they might remember how you look, but they will always remember what you said.
Exactly. And I think the way you deliver it as well is important, right? With that confidence. And sometimes you may not even have that much time. You might just have like literally somebody, I forgot what I was watching, but like say you're in the elevator with like, I don't know, Oprah for like 30 seconds, like
What you gonna
go.
tell her?
And like
Yeah.
why would she care, right? Like something that really speaks to like what it is that you want to do, and like you said, your call to action, like what do you want them to do kind of thing at the end, and not being afraid to ask that. So I really love that, really taking that courage and be like, hey, can we, set up a Zoom, or can we set up a meeting, something like that. So that's great. And
Yeah.
the other thing is also, even if you don't have all those gadgets with like you can even just have a simple business card, right? uh, Even if you
100%.
don't have a business, it doesn't matter, right? Something quick to be like, here you go. Here's my email information or whatever. So let's kind of wrap it up a little bit with what are your top tips for even, nurses or anybody watching that's interested in speaking. And this is kind of what I wanted to touch base on a little bit. So I really truly believe in diversifying yourself, right? So I've been doing like some writing and things like that for different magazines and that. So what are some tips to really get out there, get visible, and really get into speaking? What would be your top tips?
My top tips. Well, my top tips would one of them would be not to be afraid to talk about things that you're truly passionate about. I think that's kind of probably one of the biggest things,
Mhm,
right? If you have a passion for something, that will show. That it doesn't matter. It'll always shine through.
mhm,
And I think that if you're passionate about something that you're speaking about, that passion will bleed onto other
mhm,
people, and they'll say, you know what, this message is resonating with me because this individual is so passionate about. So make sure that whatever it is that you want to talk about, that you have a passion for it.
mhm,
The other thing that I would probably say is connect with other people who might be within this industry. Build those mentorship types of
mhm,
relationships. It's okay to, send an email and say, "Hey, I am actually trying to branch out into this career. How might I go about it?" And build those relationships and mentorship relationships with people that are already within the industry. And the other piece I would say is, you might have to take that leap of faith and try that free speaking engagement and see what that pro bono speaking engagement, just to get your feet wet, to see what it feels like. Because I could tell you, an online space is very different than a physical space.
right.
So make sure at least you try both, to see what that feels like for you. And again, I think that at the end of the day is you're trying to deliver something that will impact other people's lives. At the end of the day, you're delivering a service. What is that service that you're actually delivering? And I think that's important because there has to be some exchange. It's not just a one-way transaction. It's a two-way street. And I think that's how people need to think about speaking. It's not just me standing up in front of the crowd and didactically telling you what you should do with your life, but it's an exchange, and it's an exchange of ideas, an exchange of emotions and concepts. So really make sure that whatever you're delivering, that there is something that they're getting out of it as well.
Awesome points. I will say, so there's a couple things. One thing that pops into mind is also, you mentioned it kind of earlier, is also know the audience that you're speaking to.
Yep.
Hugely important, right? So you have to know, like, location wise, is it a national conference? What's the age range of who's going to be there? Because it really matters in like how you're delivering the information, right? So, and the other piece is like, yeah, you have to be a subject matter expert. And whatever even if you do use slides, or, it's minimal, you have to know your stuff because they're going to know right away.
Right.
It's like being an educator, right? If you're trying to teach
Yeah.
something and you're not prepared, it's gonna tell, and it's like it's not gonna look good for you.
Right. I mean, I think the other piece is like you are the expert on your
Right,
story or
right.
on whatever you're going to be delivering. So have confidence in yourself
Mhm.
that you can deliver that message, right? I think that's also hugely important, that it is your story, it is your opportunity to share something that maybe someone doesn't know about, maybe even themselves, through an experience that you might deliver. So again, you're the expert of your own story. So again, make sure that you bring that confidence to the front table.
Yeah,
So
I think that is key. Confidence is definitely key. And I think, like you mentioned it throughout this, the show is really connecting through storytelling, right? So not
Yes.
even if it's not just your story, but you may have a story to tell or something, or an experience that happened. People are more connected and impacted when they hear real life stories, or maybe hearing your story. And I think that's what also makes
Right.
speakers stand out, because yes, you can like lay out some facts, you want to diversify it, right? But we're humans, right? We really connect on emotional levels. So I think that really impacts, your speaking. So I just wanted to say
100%.
hello. Somebody said hello, Marco. And then we have a comment here. I struggle so much with public speaking, Damaris Adele. Yeah, we laid out some really good points. And I think one big thing is practice, right? um,
Yep. You'd be surprised. I practice every single time, every time. But even if I have a can talk where I'm like, I know I'm going to be talking about my mental health story, I always practice. It may seem silly, you practice in front of a mirror, but I think that's bet you can see your facial reactions, you can see how you emote. I think those things are important. So yeah, you have to practice if you're gonna feel a little bit more confident about speaking. And like the other piece I said is to help you feel confident is remembering that you're the expert of your own story.
Right. And also, I think, Damaris Adele, I think even just starting in very small groups, that'll help with your public speaking. And this can be, even if you're just not doing public speaking with like on a national stage or whatever, even in your presentations at work or things like that. um, Speaking to small groups is really important, or even just recording yourself and seeing how you're speaking is really helpful. So I'm sure we could talk for like a lot more. We'll definitely have to have you back on. Uh,
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
gonna do my pitch. Y'all need to have me on the gritty.
100%. We do. We do. You need
I
to come
told
on the
Sarah,
Gritty
I'm like,
Nurse
listen, you gotta
podcast.
bring me on the podcast, all right?
For sure. For sure.
Because I think I connect really well with both of you, because I'm also Canadian. We're nurses, and we're trying to also have these platforms, like you said, creating your own platforms. They have that quote, if they're not giving you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, right? But I'm like, hey, build your own table, all right?
No, make your own table. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Right. So it's been such a pleasure, and I'm just blown away, actually. And you motivate me to even do more stuff. And we were talking, we're both moms, and sometimes I get that mom guilt, like, oh man, maybe I'm doing too much, or like whatever, right? But it's like they're my motivation, right? To like to do better and things like that. So I'm so proud of you, and
Thank you.
you're motivating me to do more and more. So you guys follow
Thank you.
Aime. Where can they find you?
Oh goodness. Um, so Twitter now formerly, well, I guess it's called X now. I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a hot dumpster fire, but I still get a lot of really important messages out there. So you can find me at Twitter. My handle is at Amie Varley. You can find me on Instagram. My Twitter is Amie A Varley. As well as on LinkedIn, Amie Archibald-Varley. Just have my name spelled at the bottom. Yeah, those are the places that you could find me. And then, of course, our
Mhm.
podcast is an international podcast, the Gritty Nurse Podcast. You can find that on any of your listening platforms, as well as we have a YouTube channel, so you can follow us on YouTube as well.
And two other things. When does your book drop?
Oh man, yeah. So we're writing a book with HarperCollins. It's called The Wisdom of
Mhm.
Nurses, and that book drops April 2nd,
Awesome.
2024.
And of
Yeah.
course,
So it's
I gotta put
coming.
my book out there, Nurses Making Money
Oh,
Moves, on
all right, all right. Yeah.
nursefarah.com. You can get it there. And then I didn't bring up, so like you and Sarah met the Prime Minister over there, you know,
Yes. Oh my goodness,
at that conference.
we're always just causing trouble over here in Canada. Yeah, so I actually have a really good friend who's the chief nursing officer of Canada. Her name is Dr. Lee Chapman, and we had gone to the International Council of Nurses in Montreal, and I got a text message. It was like, "Hey, do you want to meet the Prime Minister?" And I was like, "Of course I do."
And she's like, oh, that's just
So
my
we're
friend. Yeah, listen, we need to talk. So maybe
a hundred
you come over
percent.
there in Canada and Toronto.
Oh, for sure.
reach.
Anytime. Oh, and I forgot to drop that. Yes, I have a website. You can reach me at www.amie.varley.com.
Yes, and then I'll try to drop that later in the comments because I don't think it's working right now. But you
Oh,
could
dear.
reach her there, right?
Yes, reach anytime.
If
Oh my
we're in
goodness.
Hamilton or that area, we'll definitely have to link up, right?
Link, yes.
And hang out. So it was so much fun. Like I said, I'll drop all the things later. Just send them to me. Uh,
For
and
sure.
then, yeah, and then we'll have you back on again. So such a
Sounds
pleasure.
great.
And I better get, I'm gonna come on your show too.
100%. We're going to make it happen.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you so much
everybody.
for